Hello everybody, this is Carl from s1studios.co.uk and today I'm going to have a quick chat to you about templates. I've had quite a few questions about this in regards to how they fit together, how many instances you can use and lots of other little things. So I thought best way to do it really is to build one. Now, for those of you that are not familiar with templates, if you think about it, when you're writing music in your chosen digital audio workstation, be that Logic, Cubase, Mixcraft, Studio One, whichever, what is nice is when you have your workflow proper, when you've done it properly. And by workflow, what I mean is everything is in a place where you can produce music in a quick and more straightforward fashion. It saves you time, it saves you money. It's always a good thing. And you can have many templates, and a template is basically a way of collecting all of your instruments, all of your synths, everything together in a logical format which you can get to easily, quickly, and it doesn't hog your entire system. So let's have a look at this. Now, this is just a basic template that I've put together, and I've put it together because I will be adding things to this to show you how it's done, but I wanted you to just see what a semi kind of template looks like. And this isn't to say that you have to do it this way, but this is one way of doing it. So for example, we have up here, we have our tempo track, a marker track, a video track. We can also add, if you can't see this by the way, there's a little tiny dash, where is it? There. And that's your divide track list. And if you press that, you get this lovely screen up here, and regardless of where you scroll, you'll always see these. So let's just quickly add something that we might want in there. Let's say a effects track. So let's just add track, and we'll call this reverb actually. And we'll put a preset in there. It doesn't matter what it is right now, it could be anything. Okay. And we'll move that up here, like so. So we have our reverb send. And regardless of how many of these we have open down here, it doesn't matter because that stays where it is. So let me just minimize these a sec. Okay, so then what we have is we have our sections. Now, one of the important things is to, when you're making a template, it's important to kind of put it together in something like, say, Excel, or something where you can create cells or you can group things together, because that way you can look at your workflow and you can look at the sound, because you may have thousands and thousands of instruments. And yes, you can build a template that has thousands and thousands of instruments. Of course you can. There's no right or wrong way of doing this. But it's going to be massive. And if you find that most of your work is for chamber or orchestral or just synth work or whatever, or even films, and you only use say 200-300 instruments, then having thousands of them, it just really is, there's no point. You're taking up resources. Resources are the thing that really balances out the PC, so you have to be careful with them. Processing power, RAM, hard drive space are all pretty much prime real estate when it comes to a machine. So this is an example. So here we've got an orchestral template that we're defining. In there we've got strings, violins, violins 1, violins 2, viola, cello. You can have whatever you want in here, and then you can have your articulations afterwards. Or what you can do is what I've done here, which is you go into orchestral, you go into strings, you then go into libraries, you then go into, you can see that what I've done in here is I've added the ones that I want to use from, say, Symphonia 2 here. Below that, cinematic solo strings, cinematic strings 2, Hollywood string, and you can see how this comes out. So basically what you're doing is you're creating a folder per library and a folder per articulation. Now, that's all well and good, but that might be one tier too many for most people. They might say, right, okay, well, why don't I have strings? And in strings, I'll have first violins, and I'll drag all of my first violins into there. Second violins, and I'll drag all of my second violins into there, so you have all your articulations all mapped out. And blah, 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 blah. What I'm trying to get to is there is no wrong way of doing this. You need to do it for you, not for anybody else. It has to be for you. There's no point me posting a template, because A, I might have libraries you don't have, I might not have libraries you do have, and the way my workflow works might be completely different to yours. So you won't benefit from that. Now, so you've got so much resources on your machine. What do you do when you've run out of resources, or when you're getting close? You start getting pops and clicks and latency and all kinds of crazy stuff is going on. Well, you can move that out to other PCs or other Macs or whatever, and you can do that with various tools. The one I use is, as you've probably guessed already, is Vienna. And it's Vienna Ensemble Pro 6. Now, Vienna Ensemble Pro 6 allows you to have 3 machines. You've got a master and 2 slaves. The master machine will be the one where your door is, and your slaves can be any other machine. It doesn't matter, as long as it's licensed and use the key, and they're connected via gigabit Ethernet. So make sure your internal network is fast enough. Then you're good to go. And of course, you can load up these other machines with lots of RAM, lots of hard drive space, give them a massive CPU, and that's all you really need. You don't need a sound card in them. What happens is Vienna then communicates via the LAN, or your local area network, and passes that information backwards and forwards. It's picked up by Cubase, using the plugin for Cubase, of course, the VST, and everything's fantastic. You can also have Vienna running a server on the master machine, which is what we have here. And at the moment, there's no instances in there. And instances are groups of channels that you've put together. I'm going to use that to our advantage today, because I'm going to use that to show you how to put these together. Now, there is an amount of samples you can have in Vienna, but that's the same with anything else. But it's not actually it's not something that comes into Vienna. It's more something that you need to think about from a resource standpoint. So yes, you can load every single library you own into one instance of Vienna if you have to. The problem is it will slow down, because you'll run out of resources. Your processor will be going absolutely crazy to keep up. You have to remember that any system RAM that you've got on your master machine will also be used by Cubase or Logic or whatever, and your hard drive has to stream them samples as well. So this is all about conserving these resources, not blasting them to hell, so to speak. So what we'll do is, let's say we've started our template, and the best way to start a template really is just go into Cubase, make sure it's all blank, because you don't want to start off with anything realistically, and give yourself some folders. So add folder track, and we'll say we'll add 5. Okay. So we've added 5 folders, and they're there. So what we'll do is we'll put these other folders into that folder. So we'll do this, and we'll pull this right down here, because we're not bothered about everything else. So what we're going to do is minimize or just compress these slightly. You can hide them, but I'm not that bothered. And we'll put that up there. So you've got your folder. So let's say you have, I don't know, let's say you want contact. You've got contact in there. You've got loads of samples that you want to use. So what you could do is you could either start off with something like strings or woodwinds or brass, or you could do synths or percussion or whatever, or you could say, well, actually what I want to do is all my contact samples, I want them in one folder. So you put contact in here, like so. And then you could say, oh, well, I've got strings that I really want that I'm using in contact. So you could say, oh, I know, string library. And then you could actually go, oh, well, it's actually, it's Symphobia, my string library. So why don't I put that in there as well? Oops. There we go. And you can, of course, drag these around however you like. You can also colour them however you like. Now, at this point, there's no audio and no MIDI data being created. There's nothing. All we're doing is setting out our plan for our template. Okay? So, once we've done that, once we've got our basic folder structure, and you can colour these like I've done in here, it's entirely up to you. Then you start to work on how you're going to get these instruments to play and how you're going to get them into Cubase. Now, we're not going to add them in Cubase because everybody knows how to do that. We're going to add them in Vienna. Now, in order to do that, the first thing I need to do is to add a Vienna instance. Okay, so I'm going to go up here, go to my rack instruments, go to other, and go to Vienna Ensemble Pro. This enables the plugin. Do I want to create a MIDI track? No. And the reason why I don't is because I want to add the MIDI tracks as I'm creating my template. Now, there's a few settings you've got here. The main one to look at is the cog. This tells you how many audio outputs, MIDI ports, and audio inputs you want this session to have, this plugin to have. So I'll say 64 outputs, 32 MIDI channels, don't worry too much about inputs. Click connect, and then what it does, it searches. And it's found two instances. It's found a local host one, which is the one which is on the PC, well, the Mac that I'm going to be using. And there's also one on a host machine or a slave machine, which is I switched on some time ago, which has also got a template on there. So I'm going to select the local one, connect. That's pretty much it. It's done. But let's name it. I'll just call it local instance, and we'll say 01. Just so the other thing I would say is, as you're doing this, make sure that you keep naming what you're adding, and the reason why is because it gets really confusing if you're not careful. Okay, so, and we'll also name it here. We'll call this local instance 01. Now, at this moment in time, if we go into Vienna, it'll just have this blank basically, and you've got your master bus, but there's no instruments loaded. So there's two things we'll cover. The first one is MIDI. The second one is audio. You can't really have one without the other one. Well, technically you can, but that's not what we're doing. We give control to the instruments via MIDI. So you press a key on the keyboard, it sends data to the VST, it makes a sound, we record that as audio. Now, you may notice that, oh lovely, you may notice that, I'll have to sort that out later on, that I have a lot of channels here. These are just auxiliary channels. My actual hardware channels are here. Now, when you buy a sound card, you'll have so many ins, so many outs, microphone in, headphone out, that kind of thing. You don't necessarily need a hideous amount of them, unless you're doing lots of live recording or you have other uses. Because as you create this template, you'll also be creating auxiliary outs. All these are auxiliary outs. There's no MIDI here. I've turned the MIDI off. And like I said, this is a small template. Now, these are represented by the virtual instruments as they come down here. Now, of course, the one that we're using is this one here. And at the moment, it's only got outs 1 and 2 enabled. And if we come down the mixer, ooh, easy tiger, we'll see here is this is the out 1 and 2. If we go into VST instruments and not play Vienna, you'll see there's a stereo pair there. But we can't do that. We need more than that. We need however many we want to add as instruments. And you can actually add these on the fly. You can click them and add them. Because you'll notice that when I click on here and add them, it will add them over here in the VST component, and it also adds them on the mixer. So let's add 4. Well, we'll make it up to 4. Doesn't matter how many we add. You can just go nuts if you want. And these are represented. These are the actual channels. Now this is audio. This is MIDI. or MIDI is down here. So what we're going to do now is we're going to add some MIDI channels. But actually, let's add an instrument first so you can see what's happening. So drag this back over. We say, right, okay, well, I really want, let's see, channel, insert plugin, VST, and we'll use Contact. So it loads Contact in the background, of course. And there you have Contact, all ready to be used. Contact in plugin form will only use 16 channels of MIDI. And that's a real pain in the ass, because it will support far more, but I think it only supports that in standalone mode. However, we'll work with what we've got. So the first thing you want to do if you're going to add multiple instruments to one instance of Contact is change this to all. Because technically we'll be triggering all the samples, but only on using the MIDI channels. Now, when I click here, there's two buttons that are interesting. This one selects the MIDI port. And as you can see for Vienna, there are 32 MIDI ports. What's really interesting is there may be 32 MIDI ports, but each one of them has 16 channels. Okay? So what does that mean? Well, it means that we can have 16 instruments per instance of Contact. The limitation on this is if you want to have each individual instrument in this instance to have a different stereo out. Because we only selected 64 stereo channels, which is basically enough for 32 instruments. But this will only do 16 separate instruments, but it means that we can have 2 instances of Contact. So that's what we'll use. Of course you can add more, but I would keep your instances fairly small, because the thing is, each time you have an instance, you're using up a pool of resources. When you add another one, it's a separate pool of resources. If you have too much in one pool, you might not have enough to run everything else. So you got to be. This is where the mapping out, the actual design of your template comes in, because if you've got amazing resources, you just go nuts. You have like. I think Vienna actually supports up to 768 audio channels, so you can just whatever you want. Yeah. However, I've only loaded 64, so I'm limited to 32 MIDI channels. I hope that makes sense, because I want an audio stereo pair for every instrument I'm using in Contact. I can only have 32 instruments because I've only got 64 channels that I've specified, and that's going to be a limitation. Now if I'd specified, if I doubled the amount of channels, then I could have 64 instruments, which means I can then start to use more and more of Vienna, but it would make for a far bigger template. So let's look at this. So what do we want in here? Well, it doesn't really matter what samples we do, so I'll pick some fairly small ones. What would we reckon? Let's Symphobia there pretty quick. And we'll do this one in here. So we've just added one instrument. You see it's loading in there. And horns and trombones. Why not? Now see, if you're watching, you'll notice that the output for these is set at ST.1. ST.1, stereo 1, MIDI channel A1, MIDI channel A2. So it's separated the MIDI, but it's kept the audio on the same channel. I don't want it to do that. So I'm going to go batch configuration down here, batch functions, clear output section, and create one individual channel for each added instrument. So now we have 2 separate channels, but we can't see them here. In order to see them here, you need to go down to the mixer, which is at the bottom, and click on the plus. Now we've got 2, so we'll add 2. Okay. Then what we're going to do is we're going to go back to our original bit here, and we're going to change rather than using the master bus, we'll go output 1 and 2, output 3 and 4. Now, because they are there, we can now use them. So what I'm going to do is add 2 MIDI tracks in here. Actually, let me move this out of the way. So let me just minimize this. Add 2 MIDI tracks, and there we go. Now we want these down here, so I'm going to put these into Symphobia. And then we need to tell them where Symphobia is. So we'll click on this one, and we'll go down to Vienna. Because I've named them all. They're all right, 9, 10, 12, 13. Where are you? Where's Vienna? Oh yes, of course, we named it local instance. So it will be local instance 1, MIDI 1. So, and we're going to use channel 1 for the first instrument. And if you remember, it'll be channel 2 for the next one. So, there's so many in here. Again, MIDI 1, because we're still using port 1, but we're using channel 2. And if I press a key on these, let's see. I need to stick my headphones on actually, because only you can hear me. Let's have a listen. Ugh. That's because this is. Oh, let's just take that off there. So there's our Symphobia 1 sustains, and the next one should be horns with trombones. Of course, it's really loud. I do apologise. Now, what we need to do is to make sure that we're using 1 and 2 and 3 and 4. So I'm going to select this one, and we're going to have a look on here. That's using 1 and 2. That's using 1 and 2 as well. So back over here. Let's have a look what we're doing. So they are running separately. That's fine. That's all good. And we have 1 and 2, 3 and 4 over here. And we know we turned on the channels. 1, 2, 3 and 4 over here. So let's see. We'll go into the VST. And just check what we've got here. 1, 2, 3 and 4. 1, 2, 3 and 4. So that's all good as well. Let's go back to Vienna just to make sure. Yeah, this is routed in 1 and 2, 3 and 4. Oh, that's bizarre. A1 and A2. This is actually set up correctly. There's no reason why it's doing this. So that should be 15. Instance 1. Yep, that's fine. Channel 1. Channel 2. So I'm just going to do a little bit of fault finding because this is obviously not working the way it should be. Let's just run that again just to be sure. Ah, that's why. That should be 1 and 2. That should be 3 and 4. There we go. See, I'm a complete idiot sometimes. So now we have the 2 instruments ready to be used. And because we've set up this FX channel up here, we can actually use the reverb on them. So remember, if we're using any sends, we need to go into the actual audio component. and then we'll add a send in here, called it reverb. We'll switch that on, add a bit of reverb, outs 3 and 4. Again, we can do this, and you can have anything in here. This can be any send. You can actually do it in the mixer as well if you want to. If you go to Mix Console, I'll drag it in off the other screen. Oh, how bizarre. That's right, it's blue on the other screen for some strange reason. Obviously, we've got loads and loads of channels here, but you'll see that there's blue under these two. This shows the reverb on these two channels. Now, over here, I've got the visibility section on as well, and this can help because you can turn on and off things that you don't want to see. So, for example, I could turn all these off and just have MIDI, which is these 3 channels here, but I don't really want MIDI. MIDI is normally signified by these here, so I'll take these away. You can see the symbols, but what I do want to see is if we go to VST Instruments, Local Instance, it's these we don't want. Sorry, it's these we do want. So we've got our channels here. And this is very, very good for, you've got a massive template going, you know, you can have all kinds of crazy stuff in here. A massive template going, but you don't want to work on all that. You've got limited space, so you can make the you can use the visibility tool to help you kind of see what you want to see. So now we've added reverb, so I'll just get rid of that mixer. Go away, mixer. We'll close this, and these instruments should now have reverb on. Yes, they do. The brass should. Oh dear. And you can also, because you're not using MIDI, you're using audio. So the thing I should explain is why I get rid of the MIDI, right? You can control the volume of the channel, the instrument, with MIDI. But when you load in the project afterwards, you have to then go through, touch every single one of them in order to get them back to the value that they need to be. And it was just, oh God, it was a nightmare. Whereas if you do it with the audio, well, audio is audio. So, back to the template. And so basically all we're doing is we're adding instruments into our mini template here. And we're doing that through instances of Vienna. We can do that through any of these. And as you can see here, all of these have instruments already in them. I wonder if these are trigger actually. No. I don't think I actually added much to them. No, it doesn't matter because I kind of threw this together off an old template, so that's fine. But you can use all of these, so you can add local plugins or you can add remote plugins. It's only down to the amount of resources you've got available and how much you want to use. So, well, how does this actually work? Well, obviously you've got your outputs here. These outputs are directly related to the plugin that you're using. Where's it gone? So, for example, if I'd added 700 outs, then when I did the pull-down menu here and go to outputs, I'd have a stream of them. As you can see, I've got 64, which is what I specified at the very start. So if we look on this again, you'll see that there's 64 audio outputs. Now, if you really want to load them up and go crazy, you can have, like, say, I think it's 786 audio outputs, and that's got no bearing on how many your sound card will support, but it does have a lot of bearing on how many your digital audio workstation will use and the resources you have available. So just remember, the more you have, the more resources you're going to be using. Okay, so we've done that. And what else do we have here? Vienna itself you can also use folders in there. So, for example, if I was let's say that I'd added all the instruments I wanted on this particular instance of Contact, but I got say 30 or 40 channels down here, and it's going to be a mess. What you can do is go Insert Folder, name it, and I'll say this is my first one. And you can say, right, okay, well, them 2 channels that I'm using, let's put them in there. And it also does that in the mixer, so you can minimize that. So you've got a folder now. In fact, technically that should be in there. There we go. So first one, ignore the master bus. And then I say, right, okay, so I've done that. Then let's add another VST. So let's go with play. Why not? Wait for this to load. Okay, so play is now loaded. And so we've got our new instance. So obviously we've got it for some bizarre reason it plonks it in there. So we've got Contact there with them instruments in, and we've got play with no instruments in. Let's put this in a folder as well, just because. Now, and we'll call this second. And we'll drag that in. Just makes things more neat. You can actually colour these in. You can have like second as being a different colour should you wish. Change colour. So you could say have this red if you really wanted to. Now, we're still restricted to the amount of audio channels we have. Okay, so you've got to be careful. But as far as MIDI channels are concerned, we can use a whole new port. See, this is currently using MIDI in 1. Let's change that to 2. Now we've got another 16 channels to play with. And you don't even have to create a new section to do that. It's just basically the instance will only use 16, and that's a limitation. But you can have as many instances as you want in here, in this local instance here, and you can also have as many of them as you want, because all you do is create another one in here, point it to this instance, and you'll have another one. So realistically, you can make these as big as you want, as long as you've got your audio sorted out. And you don't need to do it the way I'm doing it. You can have a library going on to one audio out if you want. It's entirely up to you. It's just I like to EQ pretty much everything. So I'm just weird like that, I suppose. I find that you can get a lot of noise on samples, even the best samples in the world. And the reason you get that is generally because you need to add that ambience to give it that lovely sound. But a little bit of sound on one sample, when you've got 40 or 50 different instruments or 150 different instruments and they all have that little ambience in them, it adds up. So, right, so with this one, let's grab a finger cymbal, mainly because it's already got a finger cymbal selected. This is play version 6, by the way, which is why you get this lovely little thing here. And let's have a break drum, why not? I'll select add, not replace. So we've now got 2 channels. You'll notice straight away, MIDI 1, MIDI 2. Main left and right, main left and right. That's not good. So we'll change that to, let's see, we've got 1, 2, 3 and 4. We'll go 5 and 6, 7 and 8. We'll create 2 more in here. So, because this is the second one. 1, 2, like so. So we've got 1, 2, 3, 4. We'll go 5, 6, 7 and 8. And this is changing the audio out. I know I've added 3 channels, but don't worry about that. And then when we go to the player, yep, that's all good. Now, of course, we've just done this in Vienna. We haven't actually added any MIDI yet. So then what we'll do is we'll minimize all of this. And we're still using Vienna, remember, so we can add two more MIDI tracks. Now, something's changed. Now, the thing that's changed is, well, obviously we've got 2 more MIDI tracks here, but we're no longer using 15. We're actually going to be 15 MIDI 1. We're actually going to be using 15 MIDI 2, channel 1, 15 MIDI 2, channel 2. And because we're now using them, if we press the key, they are somewhere. Let's see. I did put it on all, yes, so I'm not like a complete idiot. It's funny because I can see them being triggered. Let's see where they are. Oh, they're right down here. There we go. Now see how this is coming out of channel 1, out 1 and out 2. We don't want that. So I'm going to change that. Change it over in, let me drag this over here. 3 and 4, 5 and 6. There you go. 7 and 8, yay! What this is basically doing is it's adding adding 1 to the channel. So there we go, 5 and 6, and the next one. Let's just see what that's mapped to. Five and 6, 7 and 8. Oh yeah, sorry. I was getting confused because I've seen 2 of them here, but this is the master, the main out. So just me being an idiot. So, and then they're ready to be put into whatever folder you want. So we'll say, let's put them in there. It doesn't matter where. This is really just where you want your instruments to be and what libraries you want to use. Everything else is set up irrelevant. It doesn't matter what these are. It doesn't matter what these are. They can go anywhere in your template, absolutely anywhere. So I think that's pretty much it, really. I mean, I appreciate it's not a massive video. It's not a small one, but it's really to answer questions about resource handling and that kind of thing. So, as I was saying before, you can add as many contact instances as you want. Just make sure that you've got the outs to play with. I mean, because I put 64 outs into here, you could just keep adding contact instances and just have the whole instance on one output. That's entirely up to you. Or if you want separate channels, then you need to add enough stereo outs for everything to have its own separate out. But as far as MIDI is concerned, you can just go nuts. Because even though this first instance here will only support 16 channels, well, you can have as many of these as you want. In fact, you can have 32, 28, 29, 31, 32 times 16 per instance, which is crazy. So just knock yourself out with that one. Make sure, and I cannot stress this enough, when you save your template, you purge the samples. Do not save a template with samples in. It will be massive. If you can imagine, there's say 400 tracks here, and let's say you've got every single sample in your collection loaded up in say, I don't know, 6 or 7 local entities up here. That's a lot of real estate in use. Make sure you purge them. Each one has their own way of purging it. This one, you can go up here and purge samples. With the play engine, it is up here, sample purge, and then you say all instruments purge, and it just basically drops all the samples out. And what happens is, even though they're purged, you can still play the instrument. So if I was to say, wrong one. Where's that instrument? Tell you what, let me do it with Symphonia, because picking a tiny bit of using percussion it could be mapped anywhere. So we'll go to our first here, contact, and we'll purge all these samples. Purge all samples. Purge all samples. So string ensemble is MIDI 1. You see that it loads the samples in. So, and it will only load in the ones that you're using, which means that by the time you finish composing on your template, when you save that template, it's only got the ones that you're actually going to use. If you want to be really nuts about it, you could then save them as stems down here somewhere and purge them all again to make your library nice and small. So I hope this has helped. I appreciate that there might be things missing. You may still have questions. That's awesome. I'd rather you did have questions. Pop them down and I'll see if I can answer them. If there's something I've missed that you think really should be in here, then by all means send a comment. And I hope it helps somebody. Thank you very much for listening. Have a good day.